All right, good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Our 3 o'clock session. We've tried to cover a reasonable range of security topics today, and this session by Ms. Nicky Finn, an experienced agency security advisor, could perhaps be the most practical part of our proceedings, because the nuts and bolts issue of how to certify and accredit secure zones to zones 2 to 5 in compliance with Australian Government physical and related electronic construction and other security standards is vitally relevant to those of us involved in ensuring that we have compliant security zones. If you have not got an accredited and certified zone, you cannot use that zone in compliance with the provisions, and that means you've probably wasted your money. You've got a Clayton's security zone. So Nicky will take us through those elements and the role of the agency security advisor in accrediting and certifying secure zones, and that will hopefully give you a good practical knowledge of how you go about that if you need to get such formal accreditation certification. Over to you, Nicky. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for attending this presentation, and it is around about a half-hour, 40-minute presentation. I'm very flexible. If you want to ask questions as we go, that's fine, but if you'd also rather wait till the end, that's fine. Or if you want to contact me offline, that's fine too. One of the big things that I am very strong on is a very collaborative type of environment. So if this does, invoke any questions that come up in 6 months' time, reach out to me, reach out to the other practitioners that are out there. But what I'll do is try and find out where I put the clicker. They entrusted me with a clicker, and I think I've now lost it. It's scary. Or is there a laptop that I could use? I'm getting a no. Okay, so I think it might have slipped into my bag. So this is how I usually like to start the presentations. Found it. I think I moved my bag off the chair. Sorry about that. I moved my bag off the chair so someone can sit down. Anyway, I will, after that very professional start, I will continue. So I thought I'd start on, this is what I'll be talking about. And while the agency security advisor does have a role in the certification and accreditation, I thought I'd just talk about the role of the agency security advisor a little bit too. I've actually, as I've been walking around the conference, I've been seeing a few practitioners and agency security advisors. But if I was to throw to the room, what do you think would be the key things that an agency security advisor would be responsible for?
Implementation of the PSPF.
Yeah. Implementation of the PSPF, and that's just a nice throwaway line, and I'll start with that. So there's 4 outcomes in the PSPF. So we've got IT security, we've got information security, we've got governance security, and we've got physical security. So this is actually sitting in that physical security space, what I'll be talking about predominantly today. But each and every agency will have set up some form of structure, and the PSPF, so the Protective Security Policy Framework, and I'm going to, because I'm not sure what the level of understanding is in the room. And so I'll just assume that there is no knowledge, but please, if I'm saying something or using an acronym, just ask me to explain what that is. So the PSPF is whole of government policy. In the PSPF will also, and that's held by Attorney Generals, they make that policy and own that policy. And there's been a few reforms lately. One of the reforms, and this is very important for later on in the presentation, is that when it came to the PSPF from the PSM, this is showing my age, Protective Security Manual, one of the biggest things that agencies had to wrap their heads around and really understand was risk management. So it was around allowing, the PSPF allows agencies to risk manage their risk within the agency. The agency security advisor, and whether that's, and it depends on the organisation you work for. At the moment I work for NIAA, the National Indigenous Australians Agency, but I've worked in line agencies, I've worked in central agencies and lead agencies, and each one will have a slightly different structure. But at the moment I have responsibility over governance, I have responsibility over information and physical, but but not IT. But it might be in some organisations, they might have a structure where you've got a security advisor for IT, a security advisor for physical, a security advisor for governance, and a security advisor for personnel security. And this will become that you have to be able to make sure that there is someone with that helicopter view, and you'll see why as we go further down the track. But if you need to think about what an ASA does, in the PSPF it says essentially that an ASA will support the Chief Security Officer. Okay, so they're the people who sit underneath the accountable authority, which is usually what is the Secretary or the CEO. It is the Chief Security Officer, CSO, is an SES, and it could be 1, 2 or 3, depending on the organisation and the structure. There's flexibility there. But the ASA must support the Chief Security Officer to do. There's 35 elements, so that in the PSPF it says it must assist the Chief Security Officer with. And if you think of what your roles are and your job descriptions, and for any public servants in the room, I think of your duty statement, I would question you to see if there would actually be 36 things that are actually highlighted against that, because that's what's put onto an agent security advisor. Okay. This is one of many tables that is in the PSPF, and that's a table with all the different under, you can't read it, but under personnel, physical, IT and governance, that tells you what you need to be assisting a CSO with. I'm not going to read them all out, and I know you can't read them, but it is all open source information if you needed to have a look. Okay, so in establishing a security zone, there's actually 2 pathways that you can take when you are establishing a security zone. Okay. Does anyone want to hazard a guess on what that might be? Very quiet, everyone's just in here enthralled. Okay, how about I tell you? So the first way is that you've walked into a green field, or you've had a room that you've now has become operational. So you now have to determine what that security zone is. The very first thing that you need to do is determine what the business impact level is. Now, I'm going to be talking a whole lot of stuff, and your eyes are going to be glazing over, I know that. In the PSPF, everything that I'm talking about here, there is a table for. There is tables in the PSPF, every shape and size, that help you work through what each of these things are. So the business impact level is a table that basically works out the consequences, and if the asset or the information was compromised, and that is going to be your foundation. Okay, you need to do a security risk assessment, and an agency security advisor really needs to be qualified and well versed in doing risk assessments, and whether that's a very easy risk assessment, like a quick and dirty because you're just doing a quick, or if it's a whole agency-wide one. I commenced on a security risk assessment for our agency, and it's still ongoing, and I've been doing that work for about 6 months now, and I'm not even close to being complete with competing priorities and getting it done. So it can be a big piece of work as well. You need to have a security plan. You need to think about your security in depth. Now, everyone would have heard about the onion, the layers of different policies, the procedures, all the different elements that need to come in to make up that onion. You need to seek your specialist advice. And when I say specialist advice, that's, reaching out to security zone consultants, it's reaching out to builders, it's reaching out to your cohort of ASA security practitioners. Everyone has their own perspective. Like, we've got in our team a career starter who has come in very young, but some of the fresh eyes and I guess he can look at things differently to what an old person like me, through my old jaded eyes, can look at, and I often have some aha moments, and same with other members of the team. Just even if it's not necessarily a security practitioner, sometimes just having someone without that knowledge can also be useful, but definitely you need to be consulting. You need to be really familiar with your security policy framework and all the guidance in that. That will give you, and look, thanks to COVID, I can't do much. I can't pass around the wonderful tables that I'd like to, but if you go into the PSPF, it'll tell you about how you can layer zones, like whether your zone is going to be a zone 4 within a zone 1, whether it's going to be a zone 2 and a zone 2. Then there's another table that tells you how you can store your. So there's a whole lot of information in the PSPF that you must adhere to when it comes to determining the zone. The control elements, so what are the alarm systems that you need to put into that, what kind of locks. Personnel security requirements. I'm going to throw it to them, I know no one's going to answer, but why? Why would I be asking you about personnel security requirements? Like, why is that important to determine that? Because I'm talking about accreditation, certification of a zone. Why would personnel, all that soft stuff, why would that care? Why would it matter what clearance status would have?
It might determine what security clearance everyone requires in that zone.
That's right, yes. So you really need to make that determination early on as to what that will look like, and also be comfortable with risk. So I have seen a lot of agencies where the requirement is for a baseline. You know, they're not going to ever handle anything higher than protected, but they go, right, to make sure that everything is, you know, really, really watertight, really safe, I'm going to give everyone an NV1 clearance. And I've just pulled this off the PSPF, the ASIC, the Australian Government Security Vetting Agency website. And you can see the scalable costs. The higher the clearance, you're looking at $700 right up to $10,000, depending on the level of clearance you need. So if me as an agency security advisor, really risk averse, only need baseline clearances, but I'm going to NV1, and if I have a workforce of say 500 staff, that would probably be a difference of 200K. You know, and that's a small agency. A larger agency of 1,500, you know, you're looking at a difference of about 600K. You go up to NV1, 1,500 staff, and that's over $2 million added onto your budget because you're being risk averse and you haven't thought through how the personnel security, making a decision in that space, can impact the physical. Also, it'll impact the zone, because if you have an NV2 clearance, you need to be in zone 4, and there's a big difference between building a zone 4 and building a zone 2, and what bells and whistles need to go into those zones. There's also the recruitment side of the house as well. So the lead time of getting someone, they're the actual times, these times on the right, they're the times once they actually have received the pack, that's on completion of pack, how long it takes, that's their benchmark dates for completing those clearances. So, you know, recruitment, and they're now affecting HR as well. And I don't know if you've ever spoken to any of the intelligence agencies or anyone who's trying to get PB people through the door, that can be a year-long process. So, it can, you know, we're talking about some significant considerations. So, with the zones as well, in the PSPF, it'll tell you that you need to use SCEC-approved products, and you need to get them out of the CEQL, okay? So, which is the Security Equipment Evaluated Product List. You really need to have a good understanding of the suite of ASIO techniques. And I know there's probably a couple of people who will hate me for saying this, but, you know, reach out to ASIO T4 as well, because, you know, if you don't understand something, just reach out and talk to them. They're very happy. They'd rather see you at the right end of the process and assist you through some of the, you know, the complications that could arise, or some of the left field type of questions, and they are very helpful. I'm not always on the phone because I think they screen my calls, but I'm quite often on the phone to them over a range of different questions, and they've never disappointed me. I don't suggest you just ring them up to say hi though. You need to be across the information security manual, so that sits with the Australian Signals Directorate, because there's, you know, that's about the systems that you're putting in the phones, whether you can take phones in, whether, you know, the kind of security systems. And you also have to have a very good handle on the legislation, regulations, codes, standards. So as you can see, like I'm a security practitioner, and if I'm building a site, I probably know a little bit of that, and I think I know a lot, but, you know, a little bit is different to knowing a lot, and a lot, there's so many different elements that you really, the key thing when you're determining the zone is making sure you have the right people at the table, you're talking to the right people, you've pulled it apart from every angle, and you've scoped it right, okay? And then you've determined your zone. And that zone can be anywhere from a zone 1 up to a zone 5. I'll touch on a SCIF as well, but there's not many people who would probably really, in reality, be working in a SCIF or have access to a SCIF. But it's like a security clearance. When someone does your security clearance, or when someone in Expo or another authorised agency does a security clearance, they're looking at the person holistically, and that's the approach you need to take. So you need to look at this zone holistically and take all the different elements in as well. When you're going through it, this is what you're going to feel like. It's going to feel like you're walking through a minefield somewhere sometimes. And if there's any animal activists in the room, I just did that for you. Maybe I will just go up the gentleman instead. There's another way that a security zone can be established. So that's a hard way. And I mean, I've just glossed over that. There's so much in that. I mean, this can't be a lesson. If I was to talk to that, when I was a trainer at PSPC, I used to do courses, you know, that were over a week on physical security. And I could talk about this stuff and get down to that technical detail, but it's not really for here. But I've glossed over it, but there's a lot that sits under that, and I can't stress that enough. The other way that, well, what is the other way? Does anyone know? I love asking questions. Can anyone answer that?
The wrong way.
The wrong way. That's right, the wrong way. Yeah, in a way, yes. In a way, sometimes depends. I'll sit on the fence with that one. So the other way is that you walk in, it's already established. And this happened to me. I mean, it's happened to me many times actually. And it's fantastic sometimes when it happens. So an example of that, I haven't seen BJ here, but BJ was the ASA at Finance prior to my tenure there. And he had actually built the building, if anyone's familiar with the new finance building, beautiful, beautiful, one of the best buildings. When it comes to security, I walked in there probably 9 months after all the staff had arrived, and you know, we had the normal ebb and flow of business. And I was looking around, and credit to BJ and the team that he worked with, you know, the security zone consultants. They're such a mouthful, SCEP consultants. They had everything from a zone 1 right through to a skiff, and it was probably the best construction that I've ever seen. I don't think I could even fault it, and trust me, I did try. Everything was there. I came in with 1,000 questions. Everything was answered. The information was at my fingertips. All the certifications were there. They were sitting on a folder, and if I didn't want to look at them in hard copy, locked away in an appropriate area, I could go and look them up online. Everything was there, but that doesn't happen always. Walking through that building, that was me. I mean, it had different challenges. It was a neighbour's rated building, and so, you know, air control played havoc with the mag blocks, and there's other issues, but from a security stance, it was fine. So that was definitely me, you know, in the first 6 months of walking through the building. But it can often be like this, and this is coming back to your point, the wrong way. Is there anyone want to expand on what the wrong way could look like, or why it could be the wrong way?
You may not necessarily think there isn't requirement.
Yeah. So it could be. And it could be that it was scoped wrong initially, or it could be that it was risk managed. And going back to my comment about the reforms and allowing entities to risk manage, when people risk manage, and I'm going to try and be diplomatic, but I know I'm not going to be. Essentially, I'll just reset. Essentially, what the Attorney General say is that if you're going to, the PSPF is made up of core and supporting requirements that you can't budge on. You can't risk manage that. You have to meet those core and supporting requirements. So if you can't meet them, you can't go operational. And remembering what was said at the very end, the beginning of this conversation, is that you cannot go operational until you are certified. Okay. So the level of protection must be equal to or greater than the control if you're risk managing that. So an example of that could be if you're in a zone 3, you can have a commercial grade security alarm system, okay? And that's fine, that's got to be certified, a whole bunch of stuff. But if you can't do that because you haven't got the funds or you don't have the capability, whatever that looks like, you can actually then get a security guard to come around, and I think the patrols are every 4 hours, and we've got to check containers, and there's, you know, a set of standards around that in the zone. So I'm talking in the zone 1 to 3. But in a zone 4, you need to have a type 1, soon to be just type 1A, 2021. But if you don't have that type 1A, you can't use that same model and use that security guard. You can't go, well, look, I accept that risk. I accept that we're not using a type 1A. We're accepting that we're going to put that security guard on there, but it doesn't meet the core requirements. That's not how it works. You can't do that. Your risk management, what you put in place, as I said, has to be equal to or greater than. And so many times I'll go into sites, and I've spent a lot of time, and I'm not picking on defence, but I have spent a lot of time in defence, looking at, you know, some of the regional explosive ordnance depots, sites where they're holding radiation, high value assets and high risk assets. And I walk through them and I think, well, how did this meet certification? I'm not saying it didn't, because, and I'll talk about who can and can't, but I just didn't have access to any of the paperwork. So once certification's done, you've got to document it. And if I can't access that documentation, I don't know how it was risk managed, whether it does meet the controls, or what the rationale was behind it. So certifying a security zone, this is the definition from the PSPF. Pretty straightforward. I don't think there's anything that we would really be arguing about there. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty, and this is where it may get a little bit confusing, but so essentially for certification, so we're not talking accreditation, we're talking certification. Nice of you to join us, Simon. For certification, anywhere from a zone 1 to a zone 4, the Chief Security Officer or the ASA can do that. Now, I don't know of any Chief Security Officer, so we're thinking, SES band 1, 2 or 3, who would actually have the time or know enough to, and that's no disrespect at all. There's probably one, Andre, that I could think of who would be able to do it. But not many SES officers would know what's required for certification right down to that level of detail. So I'm just going to, even though the CSO can certify, I'm just going to say SA. So 1 to 4, ASIO Tier 4 do zone 5 areas, and they also do certification of a SCIF, okay? To make up this certification that, say, IS and ASA would be doing, I would be needing that in a zone 1 to 3, I need certification for the electronic access control, I need security alarm system certification, commissioning, I need security planning, I need a security risk assessment, I need to make sure that the bills are filled out, and any other zone requirements, like there could be other agency requirements that are specified as well. If it's a zone 4, the only person who can certify the alarm system is a security zone consultant, okay? So, and it must be a type 1, type 1A alarm system. I need that certification to complete my certification on a zone 4, or if it's a zone 5, ASIO will need that. I'll need to provide that to ASIO to come in and do the zone 5, or if they're certifying the SCIF, okay? I don't think there's anything more I can say on certification around. Is there anything that anyone wants to ask me here at this point before? It's exciting stuff, isn't it?
I'd just make a comment here, Nicky, that you're allowed to use Class 5 AS2201 commercial systems in a Zone 3,
Correct.
but it still has to be treated as if it's a Type 1A. So you still need a PSC 148 certificate of commissioning and compliance.
Yes.
And only a SCIF consultant can issue those.
Yes, so and we're getting down to some of the technical detail, but yes, so when it comes down to the certification, there's a table 4, I think it is, in the PSPF, in the physical security section, that details all of who can actually do all that, and right down to that level and the standards. But it can get quite technical, and it is quite right. There are quite a lot of different elements that if you're not, my best advice, if you haven't worked a lot in this space, you really need to be making sure that you're working very closely with a very good security zone consultant, because they should steer you right, or they will steer you right. And they pay very well to steer you right, any consultants in the room. But yes, good point. Anything else anyone wants to add before I do move on? Questions? No? Okay. So that's the certification. So certification is also, it's not just a word, it's, you have to have all those documentation. You've got to have all the commissioning testing reports, and there's a whole range of documentation that sits behind the certification certificate. One of the biggest, not mistakes, but misconceptions is that people, I see it all the time, practitioners are always asking zone consultants to certify areas, and this is all the time happening, and they can't do that. You might see a language on a certificate saying we've built it to the intent of, the zone 3 of the tech notes or zone 4 of the tech notes, but they cannot be the certifying authority. They commission the alarm, and that forms part of the certification that the ASA then signs off on, okay? Yeah, but it is talked about. So this is, when it comes to accrediting, and this is interesting because this is where I don't think, in my experience, and I won't speak for everyone, and myself included, I don't think this has been done as well as it should be done. Everyone's all across certification, but when it comes to that next step of accreditation and that language, I think this is where, we really need to, I guess, lift up a little bit more. And we need to, and we have to, and I'll explain a bit more later. But essentially, that's what the PSPF says. Zones 1 to 5, the CSO ASA accredits all zones 1 to 5, okay, that accrediting authority. But when it comes to a SCIF, that must be ASD. That's not negotiable, that has to be ASD. Zone and Signals Directorate. Has anyone here had to go through, and I know there's probably a couple of people in the room that have, that have had to go through accreditation with a SCIF? Because I'm just saying accreditation like that, but it's a lot of work. It's a real lot of work. So, this is me trying to be funny. I'm not sure that it worked. But, and I'm not going to throw it in the room because, hi, what is that? What's a track? It's a racetrack. What's on the racetrack? Oh. Nothing. No, there's no horses, no dogs. And so what I'm trying to point out there is that the ASIO consultant, the security zone consultant, the security installer, the EX installer, these people play such an important role, but when it comes to accreditation, they don't have a dog in the race. They really don't. It is just down to the CSO, zones 1 to 5, and ASD, okay, who actually do the accreditation, that's it, done! Okay, maybe not, I don't know. So up until this point, provided, and I just glossed over it in like 20 minutes, and I haven't gone into any detail at all, and there's a lot of detail that sits under this. Let me tell you, Nicky, just come on so easily. But having done all that in a few minutes, we've now satisfied and met the requirements number 7 and 8 of the supporting requirements in the PSPF, and that is going to make your accountable authority very happy that you've done all that. You've got all your certification, you've got all the paperwork, it's all squared away. Or is it? Let's see. There's a recertification and there's a reaccreditation. Has anyone had to do this? There's a couple of nods, yeah. What were the reasons why you had to do it?
We're just coming through, it's just coming up to 10 years.
Right.
For our zone 2s and 5 years for our zone 3s. So we just.
Want to come up here? That's great.
we're just going
no, I'm just saying you've got the, you've got
so
the.
we're just about to go out to seek some services to re-look at certification.
Yes, okay. And so I don't know if everyone heard it, but what you were saying is that zones 2 expire now, and this is relatively new requirement. They expire in 10 years, and zones 3 to 5 every 5 years. So that means all those risk managed certifications or lack of certifications, there's no excuse for those to continue on now. Operationally, they have to now be covered under this. It's not just on the expiry certification. When I was in finance, we changed the footprint of the SCIF operationally. I mean, in the day it was great and it was fine, but then we just wanted to expand the use of it and we slightly changed the footprint, and that meant that we then had to have it recertified. The very first thing I did was bring up ASIO T4. I wasn't touching that space until I told them what the concept plan was, and if they were okay with that, then we worked from there and we got all the key stakeholders in. And even that recertification probably took, I'd say, from start to finish 9 months at least. It was, quite significant. So if the operational requirement changes, if there's any physical change, so people, what it's like in particularly public service, we're whacking up walls, we're taking walls down, all that sort of stuff has an impact on the certification. So you have to make sure that it's still meeting requirements, or it could be simply that there's more reforms in the PSPF space, so you have to meet those as well. So now we continue on this cycle of recertification. Now we're done. I just want to quickly summarise, because I'm pretty much going on just on half an hour. I put this up here. Firstly, the box of roses is not to signify that being an ASA is every day is a box of roses. This actually one of the many things, the throwaway lines in the PSPF, is that an ASA has to be made available. You have to make yourself available to staff at all time, and which is fine if you've got, say, 20 staff in your workforce, but if you've got a workforce of 1,500 and they're all wanting you to be available and that's your limit, that can be quite time consuming. I had a lady talk to me the other day. I spent an hour talking to her because she was at the other end of the scam. It was quite a nasty scam, and there was threats made to her family and money and a whole range of stuff. She she was beside herself. She was only young, she was beside herself. I had to sit with her for an hour and be very present, no matter what meetings I was missing out on, what calls I knew were coming in. But that was really important. And I think from an ASA's perspective, what I'd like to really say is that we need to be present for the younger generation coming through. Like, I'm at the end of my career. I'm not ashamed to say that. I can't wait to retire. 5 to 7 years, I'm out of here. But I think the older generation, like myself, really have an obligation to, I guess, be inspiring and training up the younger cohorts that are coming through and keeping them inspired to remain. And that's not easy anymore because there's no protective security coordination centre. There's very little training available. Most of it's on the job. So it's really important that we get it right. It's really important that we connect into each other and the younger people as well. So I think our main job, my main job as an ASA, is really as an educator, whether that's to the younger generation, whether that's to, my peers, my colleagues, whether it's to my CSO, making sure that she's across or he's across the line of, what the security impacts and risks are of the organisation. They're the key things for me. And every day, like, I've worked in so many organisations, and every single organisation has something different. Every day has something different. There's never 2 days the same. What's going on now? For some of you, this has been so light on you, like, oh, there's no detail on this. For others, it's like, oh, I've got no idea what she was talking about and it still doesn't make sense. And that's okay if it doesn't make sense, because if you're going through it, all you need to do is set yourself up so you've got the right support and the right networks around to make sure that it does make sense. Because if it goes bad and you don't do something right at that foundation or any part of the process, you can find yourself in a hole world of it very quickly. But reach out, I still do. I reach out all the time to my friends. I'm always catching up with different ASAs, or if I've got an issue, I'm always asking for assistance and advice, because everyone has a different perspective. I like to think I'm always right, but I'm very rarely right. So yeah. All right. Any questions? Anyone want to rush out and do a certification tomorrow?
That will be exam. Yes, 1 or 2. Now it's working. Okay, any questions?
Yes.
So the SEC is closed, all this continues and people are learning on the job. It's got some ramifications down the road for national security essentially. So where do people go now to learn? What's the process for that, and how do you find the way of training young people on the job as they're coming into it? Because as you said, you're about to disappear into the sunset, so where does all this knowledge come from for the next year?
No, that's right. And so really we have a duty to make sure that we do have, we are, through conferences like this, through networks, I know there is a range of courses and there are providers out there, but it's really tapping into the right provider and spending a lot of time, because and I'm not saying they're not good, but you might find sometimes people just go to do a risk assessment. They've got to say a risk assessment. I see a lot, but if they haven't had that practical experience to sort of support that, that really doesn't mean a lot. You've got it on paper, but so it's our job to sort of even to know PSTC would be the ideal thing. So maybe we need to campaign to the Attorney General's Department, but it's really. For me, what I do is I do try to find appropriate courses, and sometimes, like my team recently, they're going on a course which is around perceptive interviewing. It has nothing to do with physical security, but they're out there talking to people, whether it be investigations or whether it be for talking to zone consultants. They're going to have a whole lot more of, tools in their toolkit, and plus it will inspire them to stay in security. The tools in their toolkit to make sure that they're eliciting the right information, because sometimes you can talk to people and if you don't know the right questions to ask, that can be really frustrating. And I feel that's a lot of the time that you don't know what you don't know. So it's really, when it comes to training, using whatever service providers are out there, and the PSPF, there's another table of providers in there that they suggest you use. And I think there was some work being done probably about 12 months ago where they did a survey. Did anyone see that and partake in that? Yeah. I don't know where that went. Actually, no, maybe, I don't know. I'm assuming that's my words, no one else's. I don't know where that went, but I have certainly engaged consultants. So when I was in finance, I engaged some consultants to come in and deliver some risk-based training to some of our high-risk areas. So I didn't have capacity to do it, but it was also, ticking off some PSPF requirements as well. So it's talking to providers if you can, doing your own. I mean, I'm fortunate I can probably whack together a course, but again, I'm just seeing it through my eyes, and I'm an old hand, so I might be just doing it. Maybe there's a more contemporary way to do it. So I think there is a gap in the market, but we've just got to do what we can. I think that was a bit of a rambling way to say I don't know.
Just one quick follow-up on that. Genie gives you 3 magic wishes to use. The first one you got, second one on your retirement home. Third one has to go on creating a whole of government training centre to replace the PSCC. So this, sprinkle of fairy dust, open slate, open budget. What do you do? What do you wish for?
Personally,
you've got the yacht and the retirement home. So this is about training ASAs of the future and making this stuff work.
I would really like, and I think it sits with the Attorney General's Department, I think I would like to really be lobbying for the PSGC or a similar type of body, but using industry specialists a bit more into that space to bring some more contemporary, I guess, thought processes. But I think we really need an RTO within government aimed at training government people on government buildings and how to build it and what they need to know. They don't have to be an expert, but they certainly need to know what they need to know. Yeah. Is that all right? Happy with that? I would actually just want to retire.
Yeah, okay. Well, you got the point.
Okay, do we have any other curly ones for Nicky?
Yeah, actually, I haven't had a really great one. But that's okay. I see a few consultants in the room. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, it's not really curly. What's your impression of the current security manual and what do you think its strengths and weaknesses?
And this is just my opinion.
Yeah, just your opinion.
So hands up anyone in the room who remembers a protective security manual. Yeah, I like that. That's my preference. It's good in the sense it's got a lot of detail in it. It's not as prescriptive, and I do like the fact that you can risk manage, but that's caveated with people have the confidence and the knowledge how to risk manage, because some people will either just take that black and white stance, or if they're not risk managing appropriately, then that's dangerous. So I think what I like about it is the ability, it allows flexibility for entities. And like I said, I'm working in an entity now that, what can I say? So it's a line agency, first time in a line agency, very exciting. It's very different for me. And I've jumped into that, and the highest level of classified information, apart from a couple of other smatterings, is protected, which I started, that's nothing. But with working with the National Indigenous Australian Agency, there's a lot of culturally sensitive information. So, it's a different set of risks, and we have people out in communities who can be in harm's way in very remote locations, in no zones, that sort of stuff. So it's different. The PSPF allows me to risk manage the overlay to really fit that, which is, I think, the intent of the PSPF when it did change over. But again, you've got to be confident to be able to do it properly. You don't just want to say, no phones in there, because that's, may then restrict the use of room. You now have a very expensive room and you can't take phones in, so no one goes in there and uses it. You know what I mean? So it's got to be balanced and pragmatic. Yeah. Yeah. I've got to go to the podium now.
Okay, I'll try and share it with you. I think they're excellent practical points that Nicky made then. As I said at the outset, if you can't get certification and accreditation for your secure zone, it's a Clayton secure zone and you can't use it. And I thought your comments about staff, security education and awareness in 2 categories, the first being for actual practitioners like agency security advisors, and the second being the wider staff security awareness. Definitely the latter is a force multiplier for security personnel. A security aware workforce is the most cost-effective way of protecting your assets and operations. And I thought what you said about the involving specialists and everything is very useful. And you touched upon it, the huge administrative security burden, which many people aren't mindful of in terms of zone 5s, for example. It's all very well to have a certification and accreditation. There's a huge amount of supporting documentation, site security plan, security risk assessment, personnel briefings, breach and incident reporting. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes with it. So getting the certification accreditation is the start of the journey, not the end. And I too, as a SCET consultant, have gone to places which had previous or lapsed certification accreditation. And the key thing there, here's a free tip for you, always try and maintain all the security documentation for a particular zone in a consolidated compendium. And include all your other stuff, not just the internal admin security stuff. Include your as installed drawings showing where all the devices are. Include your product brochures, your descriptions, your warranties, your maintenance contacts, and all of that. And that way you can keep it turning over properly. And finally, I would say I totally agree with you about the rather worrying gap in the bases with closing the Protective Security Training Centre from memory in August 2015. ASIS International wrote to the Secretary of Attorney Generals at the Senior Regional Vice President level, at that time pointing out we thought it was a retrograde step. And basically the response from AGs, that was known from AGs here to trade tomatoes, was that if such training is commercially available, like a certificate for foreign security risk management, not a particularly high bar, then if commercial providers provide the training, the government doesn't need to provide it. A little bit short-sighted because the PSTC have built up credibility over many years with practitioners and experts in the security, Australian intelligence community, military, law enforcement, and they had that credibility. So ideally, it would be good to have something like that again. Certainly, ASIS people have the expertise to offer that, and I'm sure we can assist everyone for a very reasonable fee. And on that note, thank you very much indeed for your very practical presentation, Nicky. Certify accredit, it's not the most glamorous part, but it does need to be done. It does need to be done properly, or you don't know what you're dealing with. And I'm delighted to present you with this framed certificate of appreciation to acknowledge your excellent contribution today.
Thank you.
Thank you.